They say the best revenge is living well. I've always found that sentiment to be a little too passive, a little too forgiving. The best revenge, I've learned, is a leveraged buyout. It has a finality to it that a new sports car or a penthouse apartment just can't match. 10 years ago, I was the charity case in our little group of friends, the butt of every joke about secondhand clothes and instant noodles. Now my signature, a simple, sharp scrawl, is the only thing standing between them and the unemployment line. Back then, my defining trait wasn't ambition or intellect. It was a quiet, gnawing hunger, not just for food, though there was plenty of that, but for a different life. While my friends, Liam, Chloe, and Marcus, were comparing the European vacations their parents had bought them, I was calculating how many overtime shifts at the campus library would cover next month's rent. They saw my worn-out jeans and my refusal to go on weekend trips as a personality flaw, a lack of spirit. They called me a ghost, someone who was physically present but never really there. They weren't entirely wrong. I was always somewhere else, observing, calculating, cataloging their casual cruelties and careless assumptions like a forensic accountant taking inventory of a bankrupt company. This ability to detach and observe, to see the world not as a place to enjoy but as a system to be solved, became my one true skill. It was born from necessity. When you can't afford to participate, you become a spectator. And as a spectator, you see things the players miss. You see the tells, the weaknesses, the lazy arrogance of those who have never had to fight for a single thing. I didn't defend this trait, not out loud. There was nothing to defend. To them, my silence was submission. To me, it was ammunition. I nurtured it in the quiet of my tiny dorm room, surrounded by overdue library books on market analysis and corporate strategy. Every snide remark from Marcus about my scholarship kid hustle, every pitying look from Chloe as she talked about a world I couldn't access, was simply more data. It reinforced my hypothesis. They were powerful, but they were not serious. They were all obsessed with one day landing a job at Ethelred Capital, the gleaming behemoth of the financial world. It was their holy grail, the ultimate validation of their expensive educations. They would talk for hours about its prestige, its bonuses, its impenetrable corporate culture. They never once imagined that the poor friend they mocked for eating ramen would, 10 years later, be the one holding the keys to the entire kingdom. And I never once gave them a reason to think otherwise. My signature on this document is the final word in a decade-long argument. But every argument has a beginning, a single spark that lights the fuse. My fuse wasn't just my own pride. It was my sister, Maya. She was the reason for the extra shifts, the ramen, the worn-out jeans. She was born with a heart condition that the doctors in our small town just shrugged at. I'd found a specialist, a surgeon in Boston, whose consultation fee alone was more than my entire semester's tuition. Every dollar I saved, every condescending glance I endured was for her. She was my real reason for living, the one thing in my life that wasn't a system to be solved, but a person to be protected. The night it all broke was at one of Liam's casual get-togethers in his father's penthouse. I was late, straight from my library shift, smelling of old paper and desperation. Marcus, holding a glass of something amber and expensive, cornered me. He was the worst of them, the one whose cruelty had the sharpest edge. "Heard you're hustling hard, Ghost," he said, his voice loud enough for Chloe and Liam to turn. "What's the big project? Saving up for a whole new personality?" I made the mistake of being honest, my voice low and tired. I told him about Maya. I saw a flicker of something in Chloe's eyes. Pity, maybe, but it was gone as soon as it came. Marcus just smiled, a slow, predatory grin. He reached into his designer wallet, pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, and held it out to me between two fingers, as if it were contaminated. "Here," he said, the word dripping with condescension, "a donation to the cause, from all of us future titans at Ethelred." He was making a spectacle of me, turning my sister's health into a punchline, a bit of theater for his friends. Liam snickered. Chloe looked at the floor. I just stood there. I didn't take the money. I just looked at his hand, then at his face, and I memorized every detail. The smug curl of his lip, the unearned confidence in his eyes. That was the moment the quiet observer inside me died, and a strategist was born. They hadn't just mocked my poverty. They had put a price tag on my sister's life and decided it was worth a crumpled 20. They had given me a target. That night was the real beginning of my journey to acquire Aethelred Capital. It's still a lot to think about, even 10 years later. If you want to hear how I turned that $20 insult into a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, make sure you like and subscribe. It really does help me keep telling this story. Okay, so I walked out of that party without a word, leaving the $20 hanging in the air. I didn't just have a plan anymore. I had a purpose. My purpose carried me through the next 3 months. I worked every shift I could get, sold textbooks I should have kept, and ate meals that were more about caloric intake than enjoyment. Every dollar was a small victory, a brick in the wall I was building around Maya. The memory of Marcus's outstretched hand, the crumpled 20, the condescending smile, it was the fuel. Finally, I had it. Enough for the consultation with Dr. Eris Thorne in Boston, the surgeon whose pioneering techniques were Maya's only real chance. I made the call, booked the appointment, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of pure, unadulterated hope. The day before we were supposed to take the bus to Boston, the phone rang. It was the specialist office. A clipped professional voice on the other end informed me that Dr. Thorne's schedule had been reprioritized and my sister's appointment was canceled. Indefinitely. No explanation, no offer to reschedule, just a closed door. I pleaded, I begged, I explained the situation, but the voice on the other end was a wall of polite indifference. When I hung up, the silence in my tiny apartment was deafening. The hope I had allowed myself to feel curdled into a cold, heavy dread. It felt too random, too cruel to be a coincidence. The confirmation came 2 days later. I was walking past a cafe near campus, my mind a fog of despair, when I saw them through the window. Liam, Chloe, and Marcus sitting at a table laughing. I couldn't help it. I stopped, hidden by the shadow of an awning. I was the ghost again, observing, and then I heard it. Marcus's voice, loud and self-satisfied. I told you Dad could handle it. One call to the hospital's board. Thorne's a great surgeon, but he's not going to risk his research funding over some charity case. Liam laughed, a sharp barking sound. So the appointment's really gone? Just like that? Marcus took a sip of his coffee. Poof, the ghost needs to learn that some doors are meant to stay closed. He tried to fly too close to the sun, so I had his wings clipped. Chloe didn't say a word, just stared into her cup, a silent accomplice. They weren't just mocking me. They had reached into my life and actively, maliciously sabotaged my sister's chance at survival to teach me a lesson. They had used their power, the very power of the system they were set to inherit, to try and break me. In that moment, standing in the cold, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. The strategist, the observer, the boy, all of it burned away, leaving behind something hard and sharp and eternal. My grief was gone. My fear was gone. All that was left was a terrifying, crystalline clarity. This was no longer about revenge. Revenge was a petty, emotional response. This was about eradication. I wasn't going to just buy Aethelred Capital. I was going to take apart their world, brick by brick. I would own the company that validated them, the board that empowered them, and the system that protected them. And I would use it to show them what a closed door really felt like. I turned from the window and walked away, not as a ghost, but as a judgment they would not see coming for 10 more years. But that cold clarity, that sense of judgment, was still a theory. Before I could build a new world, I had to make one final desperate attempt to find justice in the old one. My rage had been vaporized, but the strategist who remained knew that every option had to be exhausted. The university had a code of conduct, a system of rules that was, on paper, meant to protect all its students equally. I clung to that piece of paper like a life raft. I documented everything: the date of the party, Marcus's initial insult, the exact date and time my sister's appointment was canceled, and the conversation I overheard, quoting it as close to verbatim as my memory would allow. I was no longer a pleading victim. I was a plaintiff presenting a case. I sat in a stiff leather chair opposite the Dean of Student Affairs, a man whose name I can't remember but whose face, a mask of practiced professional concern, is etched into my mind. The office was all dark wood and university crests, designed to project an aura of gravitas and fairness. I laid out the facts calmly, my voice even, betraying none of the desolation I felt. I spoke of malicious interference, of conduct unbecoming, of the very real, life-threatening consequences of their actions. I presented my timeline, my evidence. I was asking the system to do its job. The dean listened, steepled his fingers, and nodded slowly. "This is a very serious accusation," he said, his voice smooth and placid, "and we take such matters very seriously." He looked at my single sheet of paper with my neatly written notes. "But you must understand, from our perspective, what you have is anecdotal. You overheard a conversation. There are no recordings, no other witnesses. Marcus's father is a respected member of the community and a benefactor to the hospital, and, yes, to this university. To launch an investigation on this basis, it's a delicate situation." I felt a cold dread begin to seep back in, a fear more profound than any I had felt before. It was the fear of absolute powerlessness. "Delicate?" I repeated, my voice losing its robotic calm for the first time. "My sister's surgery was canceled. This isn't about campus gossip. This is her life." He gave me a pitying look, the same one Chloe had given me at the party, but filtered through a lens of bureaucratic finality. "And we are truly sorry to hear about your sister's health issues," he said, the words utterly meaningless. "But we cannot act on hearsay. It would be his word against yours. And frankly, a student on a full scholarship accusing the son of a major donor, you can see how that might be perceived." He didn't have to say it. He was telling me I had no credibility. My poverty, my status, made my word worthless. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. It was a firewall, built to protect the powerful from the consequences of their actions. He recommended I focus on my studies and avoid any further altercations. He dismissed me. I walked out of that dark wood office and into the bright afternoon sun, but the world felt gray and muted. My frustration was so immense it felt like I was suffocating. The fear was worse. It was the terrifying, sinking realization that there were no referees. There was no higher authority to appeal to. The rules were a comforting illusion for people who didn't need them, and a cage for people like me. My final hope in fairness, in the idea that right and wrong were fixed concepts, died on the polished floor of that office. I finally understood. I couldn't report them to the system. I had to become the system. I had to become the one who decided which situations were delicate. I had to become the benefactor. I had to become the one whose word mattered. That walk back to my dorm was the longest of my life. The sun felt like an accusation, the laughter of other students a language from a different planet. Every step was a confirmation. The system wasn't a ladder I could climb. It was a fortress, and I was on the outside. The dean hadn't just dismissed my claim. He had validated Marcus's worldview. He had confirmed that their power was absolute, my life inconsequential. This suffocating frustration I'd felt in his office had cooled into something else entirely, a void. A perfect, silent vacuum where hope and fear used to be. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is a fire that consumes you. This was ice, forming from the inside out. My dorm room was my only sanctuary, a 10 by 12-foot box of concrete and quiet calculation. It was where I transformed their insults into fuel, where I built the scaffolding of my future. But when I reached the door, I saw the lock was mangled, the cheap wood around it splintered. A wave of nausea, cold and sharp, hit me. I pushed the door open. The room was a violation. My meticulously organized stacks of library books, principles of corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions, game theory, were overturned, their spines broken, their pages torn and soaked with what smelled like stale beer. My notebooks, filled with thousands of hours of notes, calculations, and strategies, were a pulpy, useless mess on the floor. Everything I had, every tool I was using to claw my way out, was systematically destroyed. And in the center of the wreckage, on my small desk, was a single, clean sheet of university letterhead. Taped to it was a crumpled $20 bill, the same one. Below it, in Marcus's arrogant, looping handwriting, were 2 sentences. Heard your meeting didn't go so well, just a reminder that you don't belong here. I stared at the note, at the $20. He hadn't just gotten away with it, he was celebrating. He knew the dean would do nothing, and he had come here, into my home, to rub my face in it. He had destroyed my books, my notes, but that wasn't the point. He was destroying the very idea that I could use their system to beat them. He was telling me that the tools of this world, the education, the rules, the institutions, would never belong to me. He was right. I didn't touch anything. I didn't clean up the mess. I just stood there in the doorway, looking at the ruins of my academic life. The ice inside me finished forming. The void was now solid. The dean had shown me the system wouldn't help me. Marcus had shown me it would actively try to destroy me. There was no path forward here. Not anymore. Trying to win on their terms, in their arena, was a fool's game. They owned the arena, they wrote the rules, and they paid the referees. My decision was not a choice. It was a conclusion, the logical result of all the presented evidence. I turned my back on the room. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't withdraw from my classes. I just walked away. I left my key on the floor, left the destroyed books and the $20 insult for them to find. Let the ghost disappear. I was no longer a student. I was no longer trying to earn a place in their world. I was going to build a new one, and from that new world, I would reach back and tear theirs to the ground. The 10-year clock had just started ticking. I walked away from that campus and never looked back. The next 10 years were not a montage of glamorous success. They were a brutal, silent grind. I didn't try to get into another prestigious university. I didn't try to play their game. Their world had rejected me, and I accepted the verdict. So I went where they weren't looking. I went to the fringes, the startup incubators and coding boot camps they would have sneered at. I found the places where results were the only currency that mattered, where a good idea was worth more than a good family name. While they were learning to manage inherited wealth at Aethelred, I was learning to create it from nothing. My first real success, a predictive analytics algorithm I sold to a logistics company, wasn't for a penthouse. It was for Maya. I found a new surgeon, a brilliant but controversial doctor in Switzerland, whose research was self-funded. There was no board of directors to sway, no benefactor to appease. There was only a price, and for the first time, I could pay it. The day she came out of that successful surgery, her future finally her own, the ice in my veins didn't melt. It settled. The original debt was paid, but the account I had opened with Marcus, Chloe, and Liam was still drawing interest. For a decade, I watched Aethelred Capital. They were a dinosaur, proud and powerful, convinced the world would never change. They mocked the tech booms and bubbles, secure in their old money traditions. Their arrogance was a mirror of Marcus's, a systemic vulnerability I knew I could one day exploit. And then, it happened. A series of bad investments in dying industries, a disastrous earnings report, a sudden crisis of confidence in their leadership. The dinosaur had stumbled. The window of opportunity wasn't just open, it was a gaping maw. Today, the final papers for the hostile takeover sit on my desk. The desk is a single, massive slab of polished concrete in an office that overlooks the entire city. There are no university crests here. There is no dark wood. There is only glass and steel and the cold, hard logic of numbers. My signature is all that's left. For a moment, I hesitate. I look at the document, the culmination of 650 days of relentless focus. Is this who I am now? A man defined by an old wound? I open a drawer and pull out a small, framed photo. It's of Maya, squinting in the sun on a beach, healthy and laughing. I didn't do this just to tear their world down. I did it to prove that the one I built for her was stronger. My world, my rules. The truth is, this isn't about revenge anymore. Revenge is an emotion. This is an audit. I pick up the pen. My signature is a simple, sharp scrawl. I slide the document across the desk to my lawyer. It's done, I say. Arrange the meeting. I'll be there in an hour. The ride to the Athelred Tower is silent. The city slides by, a river of light and glass that I once felt utterly disconnected from. Now I can feel the currents, the flows of capital and influence. I can see the whole system. The car stops. I get out and look up at the gleaming monument to their arrogance. This is the temple where they worshipped, the place that gave their lives meaning. Inside, the lobby is an echoing cavern of marble and hushed reverence. A nervous-looking executive, someone I now technically employ, rushes to meet me. "Sir," he stammers, "they're waiting for you in the main conference room. Mr. Davies, Ms. Vance, and Mr. Thorne." Liam, Chloe, and Marcus. They still don't know who bought them. They just know they've been summoned by their new owner. He leads me down a long hallway, the silence broken only by the sound of my footsteps on the marble floor. We stop in front of a pair of large, frosted glass doors. I can see their silhouettes through the glass, waiting. The executive opens one of the doors for me, and I take a final, steadying breath. Judgment has arrived. I step through the doorway, and the heavy glass door clicks shut behind me, the sound echoing in the cavernous room like a vault being sealed. For a moment, no one speaks. The room is a shrine to corporate power, with a 20-foot mahogany table so polished I can see the distorted reflections of the skyline behind me. And at the far end of it they sit, the ghosts of my past. Time has been kinder to their wallets than their faces. Liam looks soft and puffy, his expensive suit failing to hide a decade of complacent lunches. Chloe is immaculate, her hair and makeup a perfect, brittle shell, but her hands are clenched so tightly on the table, her knuckles are white. And Marcus. He looks almost the same, just older, harder, the same arrogant set of his jaw, but his eyes, which flick from me to the door and back again, hold a new kind of tension. They're the eyes of a man who has never been kept waiting in his life and doesn't know how to process it. They don't recognize me, of course they don't. They see a stranger in a perfectly tailored suit, a man who carries himself with an unnerving stillness. They see power, but they can't place its source. I walk the length of the room, my footsteps the only sound. I don't take a seat. I stand at the head of the table, placing my hands flat on the cool, dark wood. I let the silence stretch, observing them, as I did all those years ago. The players, trapped in a game they don't understand. It's Marcus who breaks first, his impatience overriding his anxiety. "Who are you?" he snaps, his voice accustomed to command. "We were told we'd be meeting the new principal of the acquisition group." I look at him, not at the man in the suit, but at the boy holding out a crumpled bill. The memory is not a hot flash of anger. It's a cold, clear image, like a photograph in a case file. "The ghost," I say, my voice quiet but carrying in the acoustic perfection of the room. "You used to call me the ghost." The change is instantaneous and fascinating to watch. Liam's jaw goes slack, his face paling. Chloe flinches as if struck, a tiny, sharp intake of breath, the only sound she makes. Her polished mask cracks, and for a second, I see the girl who looked at the floor. But Marcus. On Marcus, recognition dawns not as shock, but as a dark, gathering fury. He can't comprehend it. It's a glitch in his reality. "You?" he says, a harsh, disbelieving laugh escaping his lips. "This is a joke, some kind of sick joke." "This is not a joke, Marcus," I reply, my tone flat, transactional. "This is an audit. I've spent 10 years reviewing the books on an old debt, and today is the day we close the account. I look from his face to Chloe's, then to Liam's. I'm sure you remember the principal, the $20 you offered for my sister's life. Chloe visibly recoils, her eyes wide with a horror that looks far more real than the pity she feigned a decade ago. Liam just stares, shaking his head slowly, a man trying to deny an earthquake as the ground splits beneath him. You sabotaged her surgery, I continue, my voice never rising. You had your father call the board. You clipped my wings, I believe was the phrase. Then you broke into my room. You destroyed my books, my notes, everything I had. I reach into my jacket pocket. My movements are slow, deliberate. I don't pull out a pen or a document. I pull out a worn, crumpled $20 bill, flattened and preserved over 10 years. I place it in the center of the table, letting it slide a few inches toward them. You left me this, I say, a reminder that I didn't belong. I let my gaze sweep over their shattered faces. You were right. I didn't. Your world, this world, I gesture around the opulent room, is built on the idea that you are protected, that there are doors only you can open and rules that don't apply to you. You saw my detachment back then as a weakness, something to be mocked. You never understood. I wasn't being passive. I was observing the system, learning its flaws. Your arrogance was the biggest one. Marcus rises from his chair, his face a mask of purple rage. You think you can just walk in here? I already have, I interrupt, my voice cutting through his like glass. I own the chair you're standing next to. I own this table. I own this building. I own Aethelred Capital. It's all just a subsidiary now, my subsidiary. I finally look him dead in the eye. And as of this moment, your access is revoked, all of you. Your key cards will not work. Your corporate accounts are frozen. Your severance is under indefinite review, pending a full forensic audit of your expense reports, your emails, your entire careers. I'm told it's a delicate situation. The words hang in the air, the same bureaucratic poison the dean fed me, now weaponized and served back to them. Chloe finally makes a sound, a choked sob. Liam sinks into his chair, looking utterly broken. But Marcus just stands there, trembling with a fury that has nowhere to go. He has spent his life believing he was a player, only to find out he was just a piece in a much longer game. I turn my back on them. I don't need to see anymore. The calculation is complete. The system I built has solved the problem. As I walk toward the door, I speak one last time without looking back. This is what a closed door really feels like. The door clicks shut behind me, and I am alone in the long marble hallway. The silence is absolute. For 10 years, my life has been a single, rising note of purpose, a relentless climb toward this one moment. Now, the note has been sung, the summit has been reached, and all I feel is the sudden, terrifying silence of the peak. The ice that has been my skeleton for a decade doesn't melt. It shatters, leaving a profound, aching hollowness in its place. The adrenaline drains away, not in a rush, but like a tide receding from a barren shore, revealing the sheer emptiness of what's been left behind. I take a step, and my legs feel unsteady, the ground seeming to tilt beneath me. The war is over. The target is gone. Who am I now? Before the thought can fully form, the glass door behind me explodes open. You! Marcus roars, his voice raw and unhinged. He lunges into the hallway, his face a grotesque mask of apoplectic rage. This isn't the cold, calculating cruelty I remember. This is the frantic, cornered fury of a predator who has just realized it's in a trap. He barrels toward me, hands outstretched, not to strike, but to grab, to tear, as if he can physically rip this new reality apart. His attack is clumsy, fueled by pure ego. I sidestep his initial charge, his expensive suit jacket catching on my arm. Before he can turn, 2 uniformed security guards, my guards, are on him, their movements swift and practiced. They each take an arm, neutralizing him with an efficiency that is both brutal and impersonal. He struggles against their grip, his feet skidding on the polished marble. Do you know who I am? He screams, his voice cracking. My father? The words die in his throat as he looks past me. Chloe and Liam stand frozen in the doorway of the conference room, their faces etched with a new kind of terror. They are no longer accomplices. They are simply witnesses to his final, pathetic self-destruction. Within minutes, the police arrive. The hushed reverence of the Athelred lobby has been replaced by the quiet crackle of radios and the firm, authoritative footsteps of the officers. I stand calmly to one side as they assess the situation. Marcus is still sputtering, still trying to leverage a name that no longer holds any currency here. A senior officer approaches me, his expression professionally neutral. Sir, can you tell me what happened? I feel a strange sense of detachment, of observing a scene from a great distance. I look at the officer, then at Marcus, who is now being formally cuffed. I remember the dean's office, the feeling of suffocation, the utter powerlessness of my word against his. That world is gone. He assaulted me. I state, my voice as level and clear as it was in the conference room. My head of security can provide you with their statements. The entire incident was recorded by the hallway surveillance cameras. I believe it's camera 4C. The officer nods, making a note. And you are? I am the owner of this building, I say. The words simple facts, not boasts. And yes, I will be pressing charges. The officer's eyes flick from me to the struggling, shouting Marcus, and a subtle shift happens. He isn't weighing one man's word against another's. He is looking at an employee and his employer. He is looking at evidence and a perpetrator. The system, in its cold, impartial way, is finally working. It sees the facts, the cameras, the witnesses, the clear imbalance of power. But this time, the power is mine. Understood, sir, the officer says. We'll take him downtown. They lead Marcus away. He looks back at me one last time, his eyes no longer filled with rage, but with something far worse, the blank, hollow shock of comprehension. He finally understands. It wasn't just about the money. It was never just about the money. It was about the rules. As the elevator doors slide shut, sealing him away, I don't feel triumph. I don't feel joy. I feel the quiet, chilling click of a lock falling into place. A problem has been solved. An account has been closed. The system, my system, has rendered its judgment. The elevator doors close, and I am left alone with the ghosts who are still breathing. Liam and Chloe haven't moved from the conference room doorway. They look like statues carved from fear, posed at the exact moment of a cataclysm. The quiet hum of the building's climate control system rushes in to fill the vacuum left by the sirens. It's the sound of a machine functioning perfectly, oblivious to the human wreckage it contains. I turn to face them. My mind, the relentless machine that got me here, is already processing the next steps. Asset liquidation, redundancy protocols, legal exposure. It's cataloging their pale faces and trembling hands as data points, inputs for the next equation. This skill, this detachment, was my armor and my sword. Now, it feels like the bars of a cage I built around myself. I won, but the price was the ability to feel the victory. Chloe takes a hesitant step forward, her hand outstretched, not to me, but as if to ward off a blow. Please, she whispers, her voice thin and reedy. I was scared. I was young. I never wanted that. I look at her, and the system solver in my head kicks in. It analyzes her plea. Probability of sincerity, low. Motivation, self-preservation. Optimal response, dismiss. There is no algorithm for grace. There is no calculation for forgiveness. I can't access the part of me that might have once understood her fear, that might have seen the terrified girl behind the polished woman. That part of me was vaporized on a cold sidewalk 10 years ago. You looked at the floor, Chloe, I say. The words are not accusatory. They are a statement of historical fact, delivered with the same emotional weight as a quarterly earnings report. You made a choice. Every day, for 10 years, you benefited from the system that he weaponized and you co-signed. Your inaction was an investment. It just yielded a poor return. She flinches, the clinical precision of the words hitting her harder than any shout could. Liam, who has been staring at the floor just as Chloe did all those years ago, finally looks up. His eyes are glassy, unfocused. "What happens to us?" he asks, the question of a child. "That's no longer your concern," I reply, turning away from them and walking toward the main elevators. "The disposition of your assets and employment will be handled by the transition team. You'll be contacted by my legal department. They will inform you of the process." I don't look back. I can feel their eyes on me, but I can't register the emotion behind them. It's just more data I no longer need to process. The problem is solved. That night, in my sterile apartment overlooking the city, the hollowness becomes a physical presence. The silence is deafening. For a decade, my mind was a furnace, burning with purpose. Now it's just a cold, dark space. I try to sleep, but my brain won't shut down. It just keeps running the simulation, over and over. The meeting, Marcus's face, the crumpled 20 on the table. But there's no satisfaction, no catharsis. It's like watching a recording of someone else's life. I am the spectator once more, but this time I'm watching myself, and I see a stranger. A new kind of fear begins to creep in, colder and more insidious than any I've felt before. It's the fear that the detachment I cultivated as a weapon has become my permanent state of being. I see the world as a system to be solved, but I've solved my life's great equation and the result is zero. I won the war, but I have no idea how to live in the peace. I am the ghost they always said I was, haunting the fortress I built, a king in a kingdom of one, with no one to talk to but the echo of a victory that feels more like a final, devastating loss. The days that followed were filled with the mechanics of demolition. My lawyers and transition team moved through Aethelred's corporate structure like a controlled demolition crew, severing connections and collapsing entire departments with quiet, ruthless efficiency. I approved every action from my office, a general watching a battle on a map. The reports came in. Liam's division was dissolved. Chloe's accounts were being audited for irregularities. Their professional lives were being unwritten, sentence by sentence. Each update should have been a jolt of satisfaction. Instead, it was just a checklist being completed. The hollowness remained, a vast, echoing space. My phone buzzed. It was my assistant. "Sir, a Dean Albright from your former university is on the line. He's been trying to reach you for 2 days. He says it's a matter of institutional importance." Albright. The name clicked into place, retrieved from a cold storage of memory. The Dean of Student Affairs. The face of practiced concern. The architect of my powerlessness. The university, having seen a former student, even a dropout, ascend to the heights of finance, was now coming to me with its hand out. The irony was so perfect, so systemic, it was almost elegant. "Put him through," I said, "and schedule a meeting. Here, tomorrow." He arrived exactly on time, a man who had aged but not changed, his suit still projecting the same aura of gravitas and fairness. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was just a name on a list of potential donors, a target for a capital campaign. He took the seat opposite my concrete desk, the skyline of my city at his back, and began his pitch. "Your story is an inspiration," he began, his voice as smooth as I remembered, a testament to the kind of drive and vision we hope to instill. "We're currently breaking ground on a new center for entrepreneurial studies, and we believe a naming opportunity." I let him talk for another 30 seconds, listening to the polished, empty words. Then I raised a hand. He stopped, mid-sentence. "We've met before, Dean Albright," I said. The quiet in the room was absolute. He frowned, searching his memory. "I'm afraid I don't." 10 years ago, I said, my voice flat. "In your office, dark wood, university crests. I was a scholarship student. I came to you because the son of a major donor had his father interfere to cancel my sister's life-saving surgery. I came to you after he broke into my dorm room and destroyed my property. Do you remember what you told me?" The color drained from his face. He remembered. Not me, perhaps, but the incident. The inconvenience. It was a delicate situation. I supplied for him. My word against his. "You recommended I focus on my studies." I leaned forward slightly. The man we were discussing was Marcus Thorne. Last week, he was arrested for felony assault. He attacked me in the hallway just outside this office. It was all recorded on surveillance cameras. It seems the he said scenario is much clearer when one party owns the cameras. Albright looked like he had been turned to stone. His mask of professional concern had shattered, revealing the terrified bureaucrat beneath. I had no idea. I was bound by university policy. You were bound by money, I corrected him, the words sharp and precise. You made a calculation, the value of a donor versus the value of a scholarship student. Your system worked exactly as designed, but systems can be redesigned. I swiveled my chair to face the window, looking down at the city. I'm going to make a donation to the university dean. It will be the single largest endowment in its history, enough to build your entrepreneurial center and 10 more like it. I heard a small, choked sound of relief from him. He thought he was saved. I turned back to him. But it comes with conditions. Non-negotiable. First, you will use a portion of the funds to establish an Office of Student Advocacy. It will be fully independent, with its own legal counsel, and it will report to an external oversight committee which I will appoint. Its sole purpose will be to defend and advocate for students, especially in conflicts involving university administration or donors. Second, you will publicly amend the university's code of conduct to include what we will call the accountability clause, making it an expellable offense for any student to leverage familial or financial status to influence university proceedings, and grounds for immediate dismissal for any administrator who allows it. It will be your legacy. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. And the third condition, he whispered? The third condition is that once the office is established and the clause is ratified, you will tender your resignation. You will personally ensure the system that failed me is dismantled, and then you will exit it. He sagged in his chair, a man utterly defeated. This wasn't the revenge he would have expected. It wasn't personal or petty. It was systemic. I wasn't punishing him. I was fixing a bug in the code he was supposed to maintain. Consider it a lesson for your new Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, I said, my voice devoid of malice. When you find a flaw in a system, you don't just complain. You acquire it, and you fix it yourself. As he was escorted out of my office, the ghost of his former self, I didn't feel a rush of triumph. The hollowness was still there. But for the first time in a decade, something new mingled with it. It wasn't joy, it was order, the feeling of a broken thing being made right. I hadn't just closed an old account, I had opened a new one, ensuring that no other ghost would ever be left so completely alone in the cold. It wasn't a victory, but it was the first thing that felt like a beginning. 3 months. 90 days since the world I had built for destruction completed its task. Marcus had accepted a plea deal. Assault, combined with the findings of the forensic audit, had left him with no other move. He was a felon, his name a disgrace, his inheritance tangled in litigation. Liam had vanished, retreating to some family estate to lick his wounds. Chloe had sent a single, handwritten letter to my office. It was a long, rambling apology that I read with the same dispassionate interest I might read a market analysis. It was data, nothing more. I filed it away. The hollowness, however, remained my most loyal companion. It sat with me in the silence of my apartment. It rode with me in the elevator. It looked back at me from the polished surface of my desk. Aethelred was being rebranded, its toxic assets carved out, and its structure rebuilt on a foundation of logic and efficiency. The university had cashed my check. Dean Albright had announced his retirement, and the Office of Student Advocacy was being staffed. I had won. I had fixed the broken systems, but the victory was a sterile, flavorless thing. Maya found me one evening, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city breathe light into the dusk. I hadn't heard her let herself in. She came to stand beside me, her presence a small, warm spot in the vast cold of the room. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, looking at the view. "All those lights, all those people." I just nodded. She was silent for a long moment, then she turned to look at me, her gaze direct and unflinching. "You built a fortress to keep me safe," she said, "and I love you for it. but now you're living in it all alone. The war is over. You don't have to stand guard anymore." Her words didn't break through the ice, but they revealed the cracks that were already there. For 10 years, I had a target. Now I had nothing but the ricochet of my own success echoing in an empty life. The strategist in me had executed a perfect plan, but the man had been left behind. The next Saturday, I did something unplanned for the first time in a decade. I got in my car and drove. I didn't have a destination until I saw the familiar exit sign, the name of the university town that I had fled so long ago. I took it. I parked in a public lot and walked onto the campus, a place I had only revisited in my mind as a crime scene. It was autumn, and the grounds were a riot of red and gold. Students hurried past, their faces a mixture of stress and youthful exuberance. They didn't see me. I was a ghost again, but this time, it was by choice. I found myself walking toward the campus library, the old stone building where I'd spent countless hours smelling of old paper and desperation. I pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The silence was the same, a sacred hush of concentrated thought. I walked through the stacks, my fingers trailing along the spines of books. I found the business section, the place that had been my armory. Principles of corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions. They were all there. I pulled a copy of a familiar strategy text from the shelf, the same edition as the one Marcus had destroyed. Standing there, in the quiet hum of the library, I looked at the book not as a weapon, but as a tool. My entire life had been an exercise in using this knowledge to solve for a single variable: revenge. I had observed the system, found its flaws, and executed a hostile takeover. My unique skill. But as I watched a young student nearby, her brow furrowed in concentration, I saw it differently. She wasn't building a weapon, she was building a future. I had used my detachment to see the world as a system to be conquered. Maya was right. The war was over. And maybe this skill, this ability to see the whole board, wasn't just for conquering. A system can be observed in order to be understood. It can be analyzed in order to be improved. It can be taken apart, not to be destroyed, but to be rebuilt into something better, something that connects instead of isolates. I had dismantled the system that protected the powerful. I had audited my own life and found it empty. Now, for the first time, I could see a new problem to be solved, a new system to design, a life. It wasn't about forgiveness or forgetting. It was about building. I placed the book back on the shelf, its purpose fulfilled, and walked out of the library into the afternoon sun. The hollowness was still there, but it was no longer a vacuum. It was a space waiting to be filled. The project wasn't over. It was just beginning. I stood on the library steps, the late afternoon sun warm on my face. It felt different this time. Not the accusatory glare from the day I was dismissed by the dean, nor the muted gray light of my defeat. It was just light, a neutral fact. I took a breath, the air crisp with the smell of autumn and decaying leaves, the scent of endings and beginnings. The hollowness inside me was still there, a familiar ache, but it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a foundation. My hand went to my phone, a reflexive gesture honed over a decade of executing transactions. But for the first time, I wasn't calling a lawyer or an analyst. I scrolled past the names of my executive team, the people who ran my empire, until I found the one that mattered. I pressed the button. She answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" Maya asked, her voice instantly laced with concern. "Everything's fine," I said, and for the first time I think I meant it. "Are you busy?" We met at a small, unremarkable park halfway between the campus and the city. There were no marble floors, no skyline views, just old wooden benches and children laughing on a swing set. I bought us 2 coffees from a cart, the steam curling into the cool air. It was the most normal thing I had done in 10 years. We sat in silence for a while, just watching the world go by. I had spent so long observing people as threats, allies, or obstacles. Now I just watched them live. "So," Maya said finally, turning to me, What happens now, big brother? You won. The dragons are slain. What does the knight do when the castle is quiet? I looked down at the coffee in my hands. For 10 years, I began, my voice quiet. I've only known how to use my skills for one thing: deconstruction. I saw the world as a flawed system, and my only goal was to take it apart. Aethelred, the university, Marcus. I was a demolition expert. I took a sip of the hot, bitter liquid. When I was standing in the library, I realized a demolition expert knows exactly how a building is put together. They have to. They understand the load-bearing walls, the structural weaknesses, the foundations. I spent a decade learning the architecture of their world, just so I could tear it down. I looked at her, trying to put the abstract feeling into words. You are right, the war is over. I don't have to stand guard anymore. But I don't think I can ever stop being an architect. I don't think I can unlearn how to see the system. A small smile touched her lips. So don't, she said softly. Build something instead. And just like that, the final piece of the equation clicked into place. The hollowness wasn't an emptiness to be filled with distractions. It was the cleared ground for a new project. The Office of Student Advocacy wasn't just an act of revenge against a weak man. It was a blueprint. It was the first schematic. My mind, the cold, relentless engine that had powered my ascent, began to turn, but now it was calculating something new. I could see it. A venture fund that didn't look for pedigrees, but for resilience. A foundation that didn't just give scholarships, but provided the kind of advocacy and support that would have saved me. A system designed not to protect the powerful, but to empower the brilliant minds stuck on the outside. My detachment wasn't a flaw. It was the lens that would allow me to build it all, without sentiment, without bias, with cold, hard, perfect logic. I would build a world where a crumpled $20 bill was just garbage, not a judgment. I looked up from my coffee, at the setting sun casting long shadows across the park. The gnawing hunger I felt as a young man was gone. The icy void of the last 10 years was gone. In their place was a quiet, steady sense of purpose. I was safe now, not because of the money or the power, but because I finally understood that the ultimate revenge isn't a leveraged buyout. It's building a world where what they did to you can't happen to anyone else ever again. That's the end of that story, the closing of that 10-year account. But it's also the beginning of a new one, and I have a feeling the work is just getting started. If you want to follow along and see what gets built on that foundation, well, you know what to do. Make sure you like and subscribe. It really does help me keep telling the story.